This is part of a series, probably two or three, maybe three or four, that I'm going to do about my service in TRANG, South Vietnam, during the Vietnamese War. I served initially in the field with 2nd to 7th, 101st Airborne, 1st Airborne Mobile Cav, running a field psychological operations field team. Did that from August to the 1st of December of 1967. I then was brought down, reassigned down to become the head of intelligence for psychological operations at the 8th Psychological Operations Battalion in Nha Trang, and served in that capacity from December 1st to roughly June or July of 1968, at which time I could have gone home, but then I accepted a further assignment and continued in Vietnam to take over what was essentially an embassy project to start and to get a cultural magazine called Tong Cam in Saigon up on its feet, and up to monthly publication, ultimately 135,000 circulation, which we printed out in Japan, and we'll tell that story later on. But today, and for the next post or two, we're going to talk about running the intelligence section for psychological operations in two core areas. There were 4 core military areas, 1, 2, 3, and 4. I Corps was the Marines. Delta was 4 Corps down south of Saigon. Nha Trang sat about an hour or north of Saigon. Everything was measured in airs, not in kilometers, in time rather. And it took about an hour to fly up to Nha Trang from Saigon, or from Nha Trang to anywhere else. I'm going to talk about first just a little bit about the operations there. Every morning we'd get a big stack of confidential stuff. Sometimes we get some secret stuff. I had a staff of 4 guys, three guys, and me, a couple of Spec 4s, Specialist Fourth Class, and an E6 Sergeant, fellow by the name of a really good guy, whose name I don't remember anymore. Should do that. Remember my top kick sergeant down in Saigon, but we'll get to that. Anyway, the Spec 4s would go pawing through all this confidential stuff. So when you had an encounter out in the field, in the last, when you did, you prepared a little report. I ran into this unit, and we had, it looks like 30 guys were there, or 2 guys were there. Somebody took a pot shot at me out in Bin Tuan, wherever. And so then you generate this report, and it go through the process, and then ultimately here come a big stack of stuff in the morning to my psychological operations intelligence office. And occasionally we get some secret stuff, and even less commonly we would get the top secret stuff. We were pretty well read in, but it's always on a need-to-know basis, and we were supposed to codify what it is we found in the report, and then shovel them on over to, we had a propaganda development unit just down the hall from us, and so we generated a little report and sent it down to those guys. Those guys said, we're going to develop some psychological operations propaganda stuff from, because they were the propaganda development guys. Okay. Now, in reality, I did very little there. There was very little to do. And I'd look over the reports that we were generating. Our guys were reporting to go, looks pretty good to me. Send it. And in the afternoon, we would gather up all the stuff. Usually my sergeant did it, I think. And we got back. We had this big drum that you could rotate around, and had a 55-gallon drum with holes in it. And you dump all the confidential stuff that came in that morning, and you run around, you light it, and then around and around and around, and sprinkle these pieces of this of ashes, and that was kind of how the day ended. And then it was off to the officers club next door, the Air Force Club. They would have shows at night, and I lived down in town in a villa called Maylin, 8 Maylin. I think I've covered that one somewhere else. And I think I also mentioned it's a pretty comfortable life until we were attacked at Tet. Now I was down there, arrived down there in December, early December, December 1st, and Tet was almost exactly 2 months later. Now Tet was where in January of 1968, unexpectedly, the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong attacked us, us being the United States, all across the country, and including Saigon, where they got into our embassy, and they raised quite a lot of devil in a lot of different places, including Nha Trang. And we'll cover more or less what happened there, although I don't really have a clear memory, which is common, of what happened there. Okay, so I looked after the intelligence for 2 Corps. We had a company up in Pleiku, which is up in the Central Highlands, which is itself maybe another hour up to the northwest. And our company up there had a radio station, and we had and we were inside of a compound there, which is everything was old French stuff that they'd left, and we kind of repurposed and been there. So I would fly up from time to time at regular intervals, frankly, and I'd take a look at how they're doing in terms of how make sure they're taking care of their intelligence reports, that they have there properly, sticking them in the file cabinets, and whatever. But again, basically, there's hardly anything here. Now, the guy running our Pleiku company, and it was a company at that time. We became a battalion on the 1st of December, 1967, and then we became a company, 245th Company, so our Psychological Operations Company moved, as I recall, that was a designation of our guys up in Pleiku. And then we had, I think, 8 or 10 field teams of 3 to 5 men attached to all kinds of units throughout 2 Corps. Just as I had been down in Binh Thuan province, attached to the 2nd and 7th, and then 101st showed up, and whatever. Okay. Now, the guy initially running our operations up in Pleiku was a captain. I'll not use his name, but he had the gift, one might say, of really getting under people's skin. So this guy had wound up in Vietnam with only 4 months left until he left the military. And to manage to do that, you had to really, really made somebody really piss him off. And they shipped him out there. So he was really unhappy. I don't blame him. They shouldn't have done that. And so he was up there in Pleiku for a while. And so anyway, one day I kind of routinely I fly up there to see this guy, and he's not there. And you say, well, okay, I'll stick around. By the way, where is he? Well, he's up at Khe Sanh, where we're having a major battle. He went to Khe Sanh, where we are dropping bombs on our guys from 30,000 feet, and where it is arguably the most pitched battle in Vietnam, probably since Dien Bien Phu, and probably bigger than that. But anyway, this fellow's name is Vince. I was told Vince is up there. Well, okay, I'll give it a day or two. And I think the people up there expected me to turn around and leave, but I didn't. I had good friends with a fellow by named Larry Sparber who ran our radio station up there. And so I would hang out with Larry, and Larry and I hung out for a day or two and watched movies um, and so on, and drank, and also tooled around. We went up to the radio station, which was 5 miles outside Pleiku, out on a little berm, and eventually, of course, it got attacked. And other things, and so Larry kind of terminated. So after 2 or 3 days, I said, "Well, where's Vince? Where's Vince?" He said, "Well, okay, Vince is not in Quezon. Vince is in Hong Kong." He's in Hong Kong? On R&R? No, he just went to Hong Kong. He should be back in a few more days. This is kind of how it worked. Vince didn't really feel like he wanted to hang around play cool. He certainly didn't expect me to show up and do a snap intelligence inspection. So anyway, Vince was in. So it was not real surprising that I was offered. Would I go up to play cool and straighten things out, become the commanding officer? No, I don't want to go to play cool. I don't want to. I'm quite happy where I was, and I think that's predated when they said our guy Vince up there. But anyway, that's where Vince was, and so soon enough, Vince was replaced by a guy named Slick, Slick, and Slick was a big, kind of overweight. He couldn't have been as dumb as he looked, but Slick was not the brightest guy in the world, and he kind of bumbled around and dumbled around and so forth. And Slick eventually held a kind of a beach party on the front lawn of our unit there, and on a Saturday afternoon, everybody got drunk and brought the girls in, and pretty soon people were having sex with the girls in front of our unit and so forth. And this did not become immediately known until it kept going round and round and round, and finally hit some desk in Saigon, and Saigon said, "Well, we better go find out what happened up there in." So our unit down in Saigon, which is Fourth Psychological Operations Group, down in the rail yards down in Saigon, where I would later take over and be assigned and do the magazine there in Quonset. But they send a relatively senior officer up there. I think he was either a major, but I really think he was light colonel, lieutenant colonel. And now everybody's scared to death because this guy's coming up there, and he's going to find out about this party and about sex in the front, drunkenness, and how badly run our unit is up in Pleiku. And so with great trepidation, tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, and then here comes the guy, and to investigate. And he gets off the plane, and they run him up to the unit, which is kind of up on a hill above the. And this guy gets out of the Jeep, and he stands there, and he looks at Slick, and he says to Slick, "Show me the lawn." And that was the end of it. He said, "No, right over here." Yeah. And went back to Saigon, and as I recall, he said, "Nothing to see here." There was a lot to see there, but that was sort of Slick. We've already told the story of the radio station because I pulled in Lawrence Sparber, enduringly one of my oldest friends, the only one I'm really in contact with from Vietnam. And Larry comes to see me and my wife Carol Ann regularly, and has stayed in touch these half century that has come and gone since that time. One other story, and there's several more that I can tell about our unit, Pleiku, but They had a great barber up there. He looked great, this guy. He's a Vietnamese guy. And he's a great, likable fellow. And kind of had a reputation of this. And one night, the unit gets attacked. And the guys come in and they're throwing satchel bombs at you. And he's a sapper guys. And they kill a couple of these guys who are attacking him. And they roll one of them over. It's the barber. The barber has been shaving you. The barber was a sapper, and the barber cut your hair during the day and attacked the unit at night. And that's kind of how it went. It really did. One other thing, we ran movies over in almost every night. You could go find a movie somewhere, and they were pretty well carefully chosen what they sent over. But one night, Larry and I had a movie on called, I'd never heard of it before, called The Man for All Seasons. And we go to see Man for All Seasons, which Paul Scofield played the lead in this motion picture. And it was it was about morality and about being true to what you believe. And that movie I have seen many times since. And it is kind of hardwired into me, along with Story of a Patriot in Williamsburg, Virginia, because this character in the time of Henry VIII is true to his beliefs, and he gets his head lopped off. It's a great story, and it's beautifully written and beautifully acted. Won Best Picture, I think, in 1966. Man for All Seasons. Highly recommend it. The other movie I saw, and I saw it down in Saigon, which stayed with me, was a movie called Sebastian, and they're code breakers, and it's Dirk Bogarde and what's her name? And anyway, the actress. There are some lines in Sebastian which are easily, Sebastian is largely dismissed, but it shouldn't be, because there's just some really thoughtful, great lines in it, and I recommend Sebastian as well. All right, we're going to tell some stories next. Next coming will be travels in Two Corps, and I traveled quite a bit. I went on bombing runs, on a swift boat, went out on a search and destroy. I visited the 4th Infantry Division down in at Dragon Mountain. I flew on Air America. We got to Bong-Sung, Tuiwa, a lot of places that in my capacity as an intelligence head of intelligence, I traveled around quite a bit, and I saw quite a bit. And we'll get to all that in the next take on the TRANG. And once we're finished with the TRANG, then we're going to do the story about my time in Saigon and the magazine and Tonkin and all of that. But for now, we're going to stay on the TRANG, and we'll go from there.